I was reading something on Sly Flourish. I believe it's one of his articles called You, Me, and the D&D Open Game License. And somewhere in there he wrote the following. If you want to use this opportunity to help third-party publishers and try some other RPGs out, now's a great time. Here's a list of some awesome RPGs, some similar to D&D and some quite different. And that list is as follows: 13th Age, Blades in the Dark, Fantasy Age, Fate Condensed, Index Card RPG, Ironsworn, Level Up Advanced 5e, Numenera, Old School Essentials, and Shadow of the Demon Lord. Of course, there's countless others. After reading this article, I kind of thought what I want to do with this video is do my little bit where I pull up some photos, some images, artwork, and from that, create some bullet points that can help you either create something that can be plug and played, so pull directly from those bullet points to help you get started with a session, or just create a spark to light a fire of inspiration so you at least have some direction of where to go. You want to acquire those games. Sit down with them. Spend some time. Don't try and run the game tonight. Spend the weekend reading the rules of that book. Really get into the system. Think about the vibe, flow, and the theme of that game. What's next? Here's where hopefully I can come in. So we have a gladiator here. First thing I'm noticing is the helmet. So it's removing a lot of humanity. I can't see, I'm guessing a female, perhaps. Very well built, right? Has a little bit of that arcane feel, right? League of Legends, I think, Riots. Just based on, that's more of artistic quality or style, I should say. But that helm is removing a little bit of that humanity. It reminds me, look at Final Fantasy 13, I think. There were these like goblin type dudes that had helmets that look like that. Look it up. But I'm thinking of the mask, the helmet. I'm thinking of Sparta and kind of that, I don't know what it's called, you know, Roman Legionnaire stuff. But the plume up top, the colors definitely really strike me. Do all fighters, gladiators, need to wear some sort of head covering? Not just for the armor and protective qualities of protecting the most vital part of your body, but is that like a religious thing? Is it a cultural thing where all the helmets have this sort of vibe and feel to it? But maybe, so right there would be maybe bullet point 1, the helmet. Can you bring your own? How important is armor in this world to you, in this storyline? Maybe culturally, another bullet point that comes from that is you're allowed to bring in your own helmet. You don't have to wear the sort of quote-unquote uniform that the overseers of the arena tell you to wear. And maybe in this particular case, or in this world, this culture, again, doesn't matter what system. Yes, you're going to read through different systems and different world and narrative parts that are going to inform you as to what cultures have power and impact and so on. But you can still kind of create your own little subsection, your own little story within that. And maybe in this culture, pit fighters, gladiator combatants are respected, but they're definitely not revered as, like, let's say sumo wrestlers are in Japan. They're kind of low man on the totem pole in society. They're respected because everyone wants a little bit of that toughness. They wish they had the combat prowess, or maybe they're feared more so than respected. But they're low on the totem pole, right? Anyone that has any history, especially if it's well known, documented, as some sort of gladiatorial combatant, can never rise to the throne, right? Can never ascend to a level of nobility. But maybe someone wearing a helmet like this indicates that even though I'm low on the totem pole, I have been a part of battles and wars where I've killed Roman soldiers. I've killed elite military. And I'm wearing this helmet as a reminder to all those in my enemy that I'm about to fight that I'm pretty much a badass. So you can play into the helmet and the aesthetic of what's going on there. Okay? Look at the armor. I just talked about protecting vital parts. You're seeing a midsection there, right? So it's not protecting the guts, stomach, all that good stuff, right? And you've got a little bit of that armor hanging down below, dual wielding, wearing gloves of some sort, right? So you can really talk about and be inspired to create a world that leads you towards certain types of equipment and availability of things. It doesn't look like there's real high-level magic. This looks very almost post-apocalyptic Mad Maxian, right? Of you find whatever swords you can. Nothing there looks like a glowing elven blade of Forgotten Realms high fantasy, right? Now, what else do we have? You'll notice in this one, I'm not really talking specifically 5 bullet points. Doesn't matter how many. It's whatever starts to spark and where you can go with that. We have this beautiful background, blurred, the circle. A little bit of sun, right? Just that warm aesthetic to the whole piece, that's probably the best from a artistic skill set point of view. That's the best part of this entire piece of art for me, is the lighting. That highlight along the left side of her rib cage and her back, along the left arm. That glow and shine coming in towards the mask, right? From behind, coming towards the helmet. But maybe this is a place, obviously, that's in the desert, or it's very warm and hot. I know in my world of Silbarat, there is a location, the deserts of Zemet, the nation of Zemet, the dominant by a long shot. Almost everything else outside of this religion is considered heresy, is Ashin, the Lord of Fire, Ragnaros, basically. So you can start thinking through something like that, of once a year, the Lord of Fire. It doesn't have to be a god, but the Lord of Fire holds a weekend-long combat, a royal rumble, if you will. And the winner of that gains their blessing, where all damage they deal for the year, calendar year, until a new champion is appointed, gains plus 1d6 to all damage. Notice that can apply in almost any world. You just have this fire wild between your eyes because you're a former champion of this arena combatant. Maybe that's a permanent thing. Once you have it, even if you don't win the next contest, obviously until you die, you don't lose this boon. But whoever wins it automatically deals fire damage with their strikes, or maybe they're immune to fire. I don't know, maybe you become Daenerys and you get a baby dragon. Something related to fire, right? That's just what's screaming to me there. But notice how far you can go with that, because now I'm having to work through who or what is the Fire Lord. Is this a god? Is this something like forget what he was called in the 5e World Dragon Grid. I did a spotlight on that setting, that world. Almost like the Sauron, the Lord Soth sort of concept. There's some sort of big bad in the world, not god level, but some people consider him, almost demigod status, which is to say, in however the leveling system in your new world or your system works, you basically inform the players, this is an end boss, you're going to fight him later on, right? It might be a reoccurring villain, but it's the Lord of Fire. But how interesting is that if you win a contest, sort of at the local level, right? Like your low-level barbarian member of the party fights and wins this contest, and you're given a blessing of fire from that figure, from that NPC. But you know that as the game goes on, it's that very NPC that you need to eventually take out, right? Because they're scorching the Northlands. Whatever it may be, right? So there's a lot there that you can take away from that, just from a piece of art. And what's maybe even better is using this method of finding a piece of art, as I'm trying to illustrate to you, before you've chosen a system. Think through this, and then, with a bit of detective work and Google searching, especially if you already have kind of a short list of worlds or systems you might want to run, which world or system, like a Dark Sun basically, right, seems to fit best with that story you just came up with, and run that. You see, because if you're on the fence or you're hesitant about, man, I really want to bring whatever game and world and system we're going to play, I really want to put my best foot forward because I want myself and my players to really get engrossed in this. I want them to love it as much as we love D&D. And maybe one of the best ways to do that is for you to bring a level of excitement and inspiration to that story where the system is, and it should be, is always secondary. But the reason why I brought up something like a Dark Sun or a post-apocalyptic, I don't know if that's 13th Age or whatever it may be, is because it screams to me sort of low equipment, low magic, right? The weapons look more Borderlands-y than they do real high Star Wars-y fantasy stuff. Sci-fi fantasy. I just remember always someone told me, lightsabers is like swords in space, right? So there you have it for that, okay? The next piece of art. This is, I believe it was made by the artist for a game called, I think it's a video game, I looked it up a little bit, called Hyperfront. I know nothing about it. But again, I'm using this just for demonstration purposes. Now here we have something that obviously screams, especially when you look to the left, there's like a street and cars. That's not D&D, right? You've got air conditioning units and stuff hanging off. It kind of feels a little bit of that. I'm seeing the stacked aspect of like the favelas of Brazil, but also a little bit of Ready Player One feeling, where they have the stacks of all the different mobile homes or motor homes, I should say, right? And then you put your VR goggles on. Some catastrophe has happened, right? Because we're not just looking at the way things are constructed. We're looking at like the fallout of something. Like cars are currently falling. And on the left there, like the freeway's broken. So now you're looking at the rock San Andreas, right? What cataclysmic event has destroyed all of this stuff? Who lives there? Like, what's the significance of sort of that bridge of houses connecting those two tall buildings, the skyscrapers, if you will? Maybe nobility lives up there in those big buildings, and then it's all the poor, the downtrodden that live. Again, kind of reminding me of slums, right? Where they just build up vertically and the houses are not made of the best materials and whatnot. Over there in the distance, in the background, on the right side of the image, you have more crumbled buildings. Some of that reminds me of a recent YouTube video I've watched about Pripyat, I think, Ukraine, Chernobyl. The fallout of some sort of wasteland, apocalyptic event. But what does this world look like? See, now I'm also thinking of video games like Mirror's Edge, of like parkour, free running, climbing, the verticality of the space. Fifth Element, right? Flying cars, being able to move up. What would you need? Rocket boots, a little jetpack, grappling hooks, a la, Batman style, Spider-Man, level of stuff. To work your way up vertically, scouring the ruins of this forgotten, New York City, right? Massive buildings with bridges of disheveled structures in between them, right? That's where Last of Us is just recently, came out on HBO. In the middle, in those beat up houses, the ones that really draw your eye because they're the ones that have the most color and they're sort of showing it to you in the foreground. Now, of course, you can go to the game itself and just see what the gameplay is like, because clearly this was a piece of concept art or art made for the game, so it's got to scream something. But separating it from the game, what is this kind of sparking for you? What is this reminding you of, and where can you go with that? And I think there's a lot of power in such things, because your mind is going to start formulating questions, and it's the answers that you write down that create gameplay. You can attach anything to rules, because all you're doing there is you're creating compelling, interesting, worthy gameplay, and you might be telling your players to roll d6s, to roll 3d6, to roll d100, to roll stat plus skill, roll under, to roll over, to roll 2d20, to roll fudge, or whatever it is, plus, minus, negative, positive, that's it. To grab a handful of dice, to grab a single die. Maybe even something like, what was it, Over the Edge or something, where maybe it's diceless entirely. I don't know what the system is, but you can create a situation where you need vertical movement to move efficiently and scour the ruins. It's ruins because people have abandoned these things after the radiation has finally died out enough that you can get in there. But maybe, a la sort of Half-Life 2, you need to wear these masks and have these big gas masks, and you have that sort of, that visual, that aesthetic to the place. Who's the organization that oversees this? What are the treasure hunters called in this world that are scouring those buildings, the skyscrapers? But then the buildings in between is where all of the zombies, right? The mutated folk lurk. So that's where you know you can go for combat. But then think of how interesting that combat is when you're fighting on the roofs and you're scaling, from one to the next. So you need a system that's going to have some loose guidelines for you, or at least come up with it on your own, for jumping mechanics, for sort of acrobatics checks of what happens when you fall, what can you grab hold of? Things of that nature. What level of tech is left now? Cars used to be here. Clearly, there's cars everywhere, but things are currently falling or they're destroyed. It reminds me of a little bit of Tales from the Loop, Simon Stalenhag. Look up his stuff, of kind of a world that never was, a version of 1970s, 80s, 90s, that war-torn, and this is what's left. So, there you have it. I've rambled enough. Hopefully I've just given you something to spin the wheels on, so you have a little more confidence moving into whatever game it is that you plan on playing as you move forward. I'd love to hear in the comments what you're excited about getting started with very, very soon. And I will do the same as I usher my group into whatever is coming next. My group just hit level 12 in my 5th edition D&D campaign. I'd like to finish out the main storyline, but beyond that, I don't know where we're going yet. We shall see. I'll see you guys soon.